A man treated you like an option. Now it's his turn. I am Bonang Matheba, and right now, sister, I can feel the weight you're carrying in your chest like it's my own. You know that quiet ache that sneaks up when you're scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., waiting for a text that might never come, or when you rearrange your whole weekend just in case he decides to show up? Yeah, I've been there, curled up on the bathroom floor with mascara running, wondering why the man who said he loved me treats me like I'm just another notification he can swipe away. But let me pull you close for a second, because this isn't about pity. This is about power. This is about the moment everything shifts when a woman decides she's done being plan B. See, I used to think love meant holding on tighter when someone starts slipping away, but honey, that's not love, that's desperation wearing a pretty mask. I remember the first time I let a man make me feel small. He was charming, the kind of guy who could light up a room with one smile, and I fell hard. I'd cancel girls' nights, skip my workouts, even miss my grandma's birthday dinner because he might call, and when he did, it was always last minute, always on his terms. Hey babe, you free? Like my time was an afterthought. I'd drop everything, heart racing, just to sit on his couch while he scrolled through his phone. Looking back, I see it clear as day. Those were the breadcrumbs he was throwing, and I was starving enough to call them a meal. But you, my love, you're not starving anymore. You're waking up, you're starting to notice how your stomach twists when he says, I'll try to make it instead of I'll be there. You're catching the way he remembers every detail about his boys but forgets what you said made you cry last week. These aren't little things, darling, these are the cracks in the foundation. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to wait for the whole house to collapse before you walk out. I learned that the hard way. There was this one night, I'll never forget, I was all dressed up in this red dress I'd saved for months to wear for him. Hair done, lashes on, feeling like $1,000,000. He was supposed to pick me up at 8 for this fancy dinner he'd promised. 8 came and went, 9, 10. By 11, I was barefoot in my kitchen, eating cold Chinese takeout straight from the container, tears dripping into the lo mein. My phone finally buzzed at midnight. Sorry, babe, lost track of time with the guys. No apology call, no flowers the next day. Just that same tired excuse. And something in me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, but quiet. Like the moment before a storm, when the air gets heavy. I looked at myself in the mirror, lipstick smudged, eyes puffy, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Where was the girl who used to dance in her room to Beyoncé at 3 a.m.? Just because she felt like it? Where was the laugh that turned heads? I'd let him dim my light because I thought love meant making myself smaller to fit into his life. But that night, eating cold noodles in a dress that deserved better, I made a promise to myself. No more waiting, no more shrinking. No more teaching a man that my time, my heart, my worth could be negotiated. And sister, that's where your story begins too. Not when he finally sees you, but when you finally see yourself. When you stop measuring your value by how much effort he's willing to give on his good days. Because let me tell you something I've learned the hard way. A man's effort isn't seasonal. It's not something that comes and goes with his mood or his schedule. When someone loves you, really loves you, they don't make you audition for the role of girlfriend every other week. They don't keep you in the waiting room of their life, hoping you'll be patient enough for when they're ready. No, ma'am. They move mountains, they cancel plans. They show up with your favorite coffee just because they passed the shop and thought of you. They remember that you hate olives and love extra cheese. They text back, they call when they say they will. They make you feel like the main event, not the opening act. But when you're with someone who treats you like an option, everything feels conditional. Your plans are penciled in. Your feelings are acknowledged only when convenient. Your needs are met only after everyone else's. And the worst part? You start believing that's what you deserve. You start making excuses for him. He's just busy. He's going through something. If I love him harder, he'll come around. Oh, honey, I've said every single one of those lies to myself. I've convinced myself that if I could just be more understanding, more patient, more perfect, then he'd finally see me. But here's the truth, that set me free, love isn't a renovation project. You don't get to love someone into being the partner you need. They either are or they aren't. And if they're making you question whether you're asking for too much just to be treated with basic respect, then baby girl, you're not asking for too much, you're with too little. I want you to think about the last time you felt truly seen by him. Not tolerated, not accommodated, seen. When was the last time he looked at you like you were the answer to a question he hadn't even asked yet? When was the last time he chose you without you having to remind him that you were still there? If you have to think harder than a heartbeat to answer that, then we're already on the same page. Because the woman I'm talking to right now, the one reading this with tears in her eyes or fire in her chest, she deserves more than scraps. She deserves the whole damn feast. And the beautiful thing is, once you decide that, once you stop accepting the bare minimum as if it's a blessing, everything changes. Not because he suddenly wakes up, but because you do. You start noticing how much energy you've been pouring into someone who wouldn't cross the street for you. You start seeing all the ways you've been dimming your own light just to keep his ego comfortable. And most importantly, you start remembering who you were before he made you doubt yourself. That girl, she's still in there. She's been waiting for you to come back home to her. And this journey we're about to take together, it's not about getting revenge or proving anything to him. It's about proving everything to yourself. It's about walking away, not because you're giving up, but because you're growing up. Because you finally understand that your worth isn't negotiable currency in someone else's economy. It's the foundation of your entire existence. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve access to it. So take a deep breath with me right now. Feel that weight in your chest. That's not weakness, that's wisdom trying to break through. That's your intuition screaming what your heart's been whispering for months. And sister, it's time to listen. Because the moment you stop letting a man treat you like an option is the moment you start treating yourself like the prize you were always meant to be. Let me paint this picture for you because I need you to see it clearly. The first real sign that he was making you his backup plan. It starts small, always does. Like the way he'd text you at 9 p.m. on a Friday, what you up to after you'd spent the whole week talking about your plans to try that new wine bar downtown. You'd been dropping hints for days, sending him the menu, talking about the live jazz band, practically planning the whole date in your head. And there you were, already in your pajamas, hair in a messy bun, thinking maybe this weekend would be different, maybe this time he'd remember. But no, it's always the same script. You're his afterthought entertainment, the person he reaches for when his first choices fall through. And the crazy part, you answer every single time. You tell yourself it's because you care, because you don't want to seem difficult, because maybe if you're available enough, he'll finally see how amazing you are. But let me ask you something. When has being perpetually available ever made someone value you more? When has shrinking your plans to fit into the cracks of his schedule ever made him expand his world to include you fully? Never. It just teaches him that your time has no value, that your excitement can be postponed, that your heart can be put on hold. I remember when I first noticed this pattern with my ex. We'd been together 8 months, and I'd planned this whole beach day for us. Packed the cooler, made sandwiches, even bought that cute swimsuit cover-up I'd been eyeing, told him 2 weeks in advance, marked it on both our calendars. The morning of, I woke up buzzing with excitement, texting him, "Can't wait to see you at 10. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. That's it, just a thumbs up. By 10:30, I was calling. No answer. 11, still nothing. At noon, I finally get a text. Overslept. Maybe next weekend? Next weekend. Like my effort, my anticipation, my carefully packed picnic was just a rain check kind of thing. And what did I do? I said it was fine. I ate the sandwiches alone on my balcony, watching couples walk by, holding hands, telling myself he didn't mean it. He was just tired. He had a lot going on. But here's what I know now. When someone wants to be there, they are. They don't oversleep on your dreams. They don't postpone your joy. They don't treat your carefully planned moments like movable pieces on their chessboard. Another sign? The way he'd go radio silent for days, then pop back up like nothing happened. "Hey, stranger," he'd say, as if I was the one who disappeared. And I'd fall for it every time, because those 3 days of silence had me so anxious, so desperate for connection, that any crumb felt like a banquet. We'd have these intense make-up conversations where he'd say all the right things. "I miss you, you're amazing, I don't know what I'd do without you," and I'd melt. I'd let him back in without requiring anything to change, without asking why he felt comfortable disappearing on me, without demanding that if he wanted this relationship, he needed to show up for it consistently. Because the truth is, sister, inconsistent men love consistent women. They love knowing we'll be there no matter how poorly they behave. They love the safety net of our forgiveness, the reliability of our understanding. But what they don't love is when we start requiring the same energy we give. When we start saying, "If you can't text me back within a reasonable time, don't bother texting at all." When we start canceling plans we made with them first because we finally made plans with ourselves. When we start treating our own time with the same respect we give theirs, that's when the game changes. I want you to think about your own situation right now. Be honest with me, how many times have you cleared your schedule for him only to have him cancel last minute? How many times have you stayed up waiting for a call that never came? How many times have you explained away his absence to your friends, to your family, to yourself? These aren't just bad days, love. This is a pattern. This is him showing you exactly where you rank in his priority list. And spoiler alert, it's not at the top. But here's where your power comes in. The moment you stop accepting these behaviors as normal, the moment you start seeing them for what they are, disrespect disguised as busyness, indifference dressed up as independence, that's the moment you take back control. You don't need to confront him yet. You don't need to make a scene. You just need to start noticing. Start keeping track in your mind of how often he chooses everything else over you. Start paying attention to how you feel after every interaction. Does your heart feel full, or does it feel like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop? Because a man who treats you like an option will always keep you in a state of anxious anticipation. You'll be performing availability like it's your full-time job. You'll be managing his emotions while neglecting your own. You'll be so busy trying to keep him comfortable that you forget you have needs too. And let me tell you, from someone who's lived it, that kind of relationship isn't sustainable. It's like trying to water a plant with an empty cup. Eventually, there's nothing left to give. But the beautiful thing is, once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize that you're being treated like a backup plan, you start planning your exit. Not dramatically, not with ultimatums or threats, but quietly, purposefully. You start pulling your energy back. You start making plans that don't include him. You start saying yes to the things you postponed for his maybe. You start rebuilding the life he made you pause. And sister, that's not punishment, that's preparation. Preparation for the version of you who's done waiting in the wings. Preparation for the love that doesn't require you to audition daily. Preparation for the moment when being chosen feels as natural as breathing, because the person choosing you knows exactly what they're getting. Someone who knows her worth and won't settle for anything less. The first step in breaking free from being someone's option is recognizing that you've become one and refusing to stay there a moment longer. You know that feeling when you've been carrying something heavy for so long that you forget you're even holding it? That's what giving too much in a one-sided relationship feels like. You start off so full of love, so excited to share it, that you don't notice how quickly your cup is emptying while his stays comfortably full. You become the emotional caretaker, the planner, the rememberer of birthdays and anniversaries, the one who checks in when he's stressed, who drops off soup when he's sick, who listens to his dreams while quietly setting yours aside. And at first, it feels good, doesn't it? It feels like love. It feels like partnership. You're thinking, look at everything I'm doing. Look at how much I care. Surely he'll see this and give back the same way. But weeks turn into months, and you're still the one initiating every deep conversation, planning every date, keeping the emotional temperature of the relationship exactly where it needs to be for him to be comfortable. Meanwhile, your needs, there are these quiet little whispers you keep pushing down because you don't want to seem needy. You don't want to rock the boat. You tell yourself that if you just keep giving, eventually the scales will balance, but honey, they don't. They just teach him that he can receive without reciprocating, that he can take your love, your time, your energy without ever having to refill your cup. I remember when I hit my breaking point with this, I'd been with him for a year and I'd planned this elaborate anniversary surprise. Booked a weekend getaway to this cute little cabin in the mountains, packed his favorite foods, made a playlist of all our songs, even wrote him this long letter about everything he'd brought to my life. Spent weeks planning every detail. The morning we were supposed to leave, I was buzzing with excitement, had the car packed, coffee ready, waiting for him to come downstairs. He walks in, looks at everything, and says, "Babe, I can't. I promised the guys I'd help move this weekend." Just like that. No discussion, no, can we reschedule? No acknowledgement of how much effort I'd put in, just his plan superseding mine again. And I stood there holding this beautiful weekend I'd created, watching it crumble because his friends needed help moving a couch. But do you know what hurt worse? That I didn't even argue. I just said, okay, maybe another time, and started unpacking the car, started putting away the wine, the candles, the letter I'd poured my heart into. Because somewhere along the way, I'd learned that my disappointment didn't matter as much as his convenience. That my excitement could be postponed indefinitely, that my love was something to be received, but not necessarily returned with equal enthusiasm. And that's when I realized I'd become the giver who never received. The one who kept the relationship afloat while he barely kept his head above water. The one who remembered that he liked his coffee with exactly 2 sugars while he couldn't remember if I took cream or not. The one who celebrated his promotions with thoughtful gifts while my achievements got a "that's great babe" text. It wasn't that he was a bad person, he just got comfortable. Comfortable knowing I'd always be there to pick up the slack. Comfortable taking my emotional labor for granted. Comfortable receiving my love without having to work for it. And the worst part was, I let him. Every time I planned something and he bailed without consequence, I taught him that my effort had no value. Every time I checked in on him without him checking on me, I taught him that my emotional needs were optional. Every time I celebrated him while my own milestones went unnoticed, I taught him that my joy was less important than his. But sister, let me tell you about the moment that changed everything for me. It was about 2 months after the anniversary disaster. I'd been promoted at work, big promotion, the kind I'd been working toward for years. I was over the moon, called my mom, my best friends, posted about it online, waited all day for his response. He saw my message at 10 a.m. By 8 p.m., nothing. Finally, at 11 p.m., he texts, "Congrats, babe." That's it. 2 words for something that meant the world to me, and something in me just broke open. Not in anger, but in clarity. I saw it all so clearly, how much I'd been pouring into this relationship, how much of myself I'd given away, how empty my own cup had become. I wasn't his partner, I was his emotional support system, his convenience, his sure thing, and I was exhausted. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the soul-deep exhaustion that comes from loving someone more than they love you back. From carrying the weight of a relationship on your shoulders while they walk beside you empty-handed, from constantly giving pieces of yourself until there's nothing left for you. But here's where your story gets beautiful, because recognizing that you've given too much is the first step toward taking it back. It's the moment you stop seeing your love as something to be proven through endless giving and start seeing it as something precious to be protected. Something that should be reciprocated, celebrated, returned with interest. Because the truth is, love isn't about who can give the most before they break. It's about who shows up consistently, who matches your effort, who sees your giving and says, "Let me take care of you now." And if you're with someone who lets you pour and pour without ever filling you back up, who takes your love like it's his birthright without earning it daily, then baby girl, you're not in a relationship, you're in emotional servitude. But you don't have to stay there. You get to decide that your love is no longer up for grabs to someone who won't treasure it. You get to take all that beautiful energy you've been giving away and start giving it to yourself. You get to plan that weekend getaway for one. You get to celebrate your wins with people who show up with balloons and champagne. You get to write yourself that love letter detailing everything amazing about who you are and what you've accomplished. Because the moment you stop overgiving to someone who under-receives is the moment you start overflowing with love for the most important person in your life. And trust me when I tell you, once you start filling your own cup, once you start treating yourself with the same enthusiasm and care you've been giving him, the whole world shifts. You walk differently. You talk differently. You stop accepting crumbs because you know what a full meal feels like. You stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth because you're too busy living it. And that's not selfish love. That's necessary. That's the foundation of every healthy relationship you'll ever have, starting with the one you have with yourself. So take inventory right now of everything you've been giving that isn't being returned. Write it down if you need to. See it in black and white. And then make a promise to yourself, not to him, that from this moment forward, your love comes with conditions. Not manipulation, not games, but basic human reciprocity. That anyone who wants access to your heart must be willing to maintain it with the same care you give. That your effort will be matched, your time will be valued, your love will be celebrated. Because you, my darling, have given enough to someone who was never hungry for what you were serving. The moment you stop over-giving to someone who won't reciprocate is the moment you start receiving the kind of love you've always deserved. And there it was, that quiet morning in my bathroom with the steam from the shower still fogging up the mirror when I wiped a clear circle with my towel and really looked at myself for the first time in months. Not the quick glance to check if my eyeliner was even, not the half-second appraisal before rushing out the door to meet his schedule, but a real, deep, soul-searching stare. My eyes were tired, sure, but underneath that fatigue was something else, something fierce trying to push through. I remember whispering to my reflection, "Girl, when did you forget how incredible you are?" And in that moment, the fog didn't just clear from the glass, it cleared from my mind. I realized that every time I'd let him cancel plans, every time I'd accepted a half-hearted apology, every time I'd convinced myself that his inconsistency was just how men are, I'd been handing over pieces of my worth like they were free samples at the grocery store, but no more. That morning marked the turning point. The exact second I decided that my value wasn't something he got to vote on, wasn't something that needed his approval stamp to be valid. It was mine, always had been, and I'd just been too busy trying to prove it to someone who couldn't see to remember that. I started small because big revelations deserve gentle implementation. I stopped checking my phone first thing when I woke up, waiting for his good morning text that might or might not come. Instead, I rolled over, grabbed my journal from the nightstand, and wrote 3 things I loved about myself before my feet even hit the floor. I am resilient, I am creative, I am worthy of someone who shows up. Simple sentences, but saying them out loud while looking at my sleepy face in the mirror felt revolutionary. Then I made my coffee exactly how I liked it, extra foam, dash of cinnamon, no compromising because he thought cinnamon was weird. I sat on my balcony watching the sunrise, something I'd stopped doing because mornings were for rushing to be available when he finally decided to grace me with his attention. And you know what? The sun rose just fine without his permission. The birds sang their little hearts out. My coffee tasted better than it had in months. That was day 1 of remembering. Day 2, I went to the gym, not the one near his place that I'd switched to for convenience, but my old spot with the killer playlist and the instructor who always made me laugh. I sweated out months of frustration, of second guessing, of making myself smaller. Every squat was me reclaiming space he'd convinced me I didn't deserve to take up. Every mile on the treadmill was distance between the old me and the woman I was becoming. By the time I left, my legs were jelly, but my spirit was solid. I treated myself to a smoothie, the one with extra protein and pineapple that he used to say was too girly, and I drank every drop like it was liquid confidence. The real test came that evening. He texted. Of course he did, because even inconsistent men have a sixth sense for when you're pulling away. Hey, beautiful, what you up to tonight? Classic move, no acknowledgement of the radio silence, no reference to the plans we'd vaguely discussed, just assuming I'd rearrange my world for his spontaneous interest. 6 months ago, I would have dropped everything. 3 months ago, I would have at least responded immediately. But that night, I finished my skincare routine, put on my favorite silk pajamas, the ones I'd stopped wearing because he said they were too fancy for hanging out, and I let that text sit. Not out of spite, not to play games, but because I was busy having dinner with someone who actually valued my company, me. I cooked the pasta I'd been craving, the one with the creamy sauce he hated, and I ate it slowly, savoring every bite while watching my favorite show, the one he'd always change the channel on. When I finally picked up my phone at 1:00 p.m., his text was still there, followed by 2 more. Hello, and you okay? I smiled, not the bitter kind, but the kind that comes from knowing your peace is no longer negotiable. I typed back, actually having a great night, talk tomorrow, and I meant it. No explanation, no apology for not being immediately available, no performing enthusiasm to keep him comfortable, just truth. And when I went to bed that night, I slept deeper than I had in months because for the first time, my dreams weren't filled with anxiety about whether I'd done enough to keep him interested. They were filled with possibilities of what life could be when I stopped outsourcing my worth to someone who treated it like an afterthought. The days that followed were a masterclass in self-reclamation. I started saying yes to things I'd postponed for his maybe later. That painting class I'd bookmarked, signed up. The concert tickets my friend had been begging me to buy, purchased. The promotion I'd been hesitant to accept because it meant more travel and he didn't like being apart, I took it. And I took it with pride. Every yes to myself was a no to the version of me who'd been waiting for validation in all the wrong places. I started dressing for me again, the bold colors, the statement earrings, the heels that made me feel powerful, not the muted tones I'd adopted because he said bright colors were too much. I laughed louder, took up more space, spoke my mind without filtering it through what I thought he could handle. And the most amazing part, the world didn't end. People didn't run away. In fact, they gravitated toward this version of me, the one who knew her worth, wasn't dependent on someone else's ability to see it. But let me be real with you, this awakening wasn't all sunshine and smoothies. There were moments of doubt, moments when the old patterns tried to creep back in. Like when I saw couples holding hands at the grocery store and felt that familiar pang of why not me? Or when my phone would buzz with notifications from everyone except him, and part of me wanted to reach out just to feel that temporary hit of attention. But here's what I learned, and what I want you to tattoo on your heart. Your worth isn't proven in moments of strength, it's proven in moments of temptation when you choose yourself anyway. Every time I felt that pull to text him first, to make excuses for his behavior, to shrink back into the comfortable discomfort of being his option, I paused, I breathed. I remembered the woman in the mirror who decided enough was enough, and I chose her every single time. I started collecting evidence of my own value the way I'd once collected evidence of his love. Screenshots of achievements, photos of adventures I'd taken alone, compliments from colleagues about my leadership, even the simple satisfaction of coming home to an apartment that reflected my taste completely, no compromises for his minimalist aesthetic that had slowly taken over. I created a worth folder on my phone, a digital altar to my own greatness. When doubt crept in, I'd scroll through it like medicine. Look, I'd tell myself, this is who you are when you stop waiting for someone else to confirm it. The breakthrough moment, the one that solidified everything, came about 3 weeks into this journey. I was at a work event dressed in this emerald green suit that hugged every curve, feeling like the boss I was becoming. I was networking, laughing completely in my element when I looked across the room and saw him. Not my ex, someone new. Someone who looked at me, not like I was one of many options, but like I was the only person in the room worth seeing. Our eyes met, and instead of that familiar anxiety of, does he like me? I felt something different. Curiosity about whether he could handle the woman I was becoming. But that's a story for later. The point is, in that moment, I realized the shift was complete. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I was looking for someone who could match the energy I was finally giving myself. Someone who saw my worth not as something to be earned, but as something to be celebrated from day one. And sister, that's the moment I want for you too. That moment when you look in the mirror and don't need anyone else's voice to tell you you're enough, because your own voice is finally loud enough to drown out all the doubt. The moment when your worth stops being a question and becomes a declaration. The moment you realize that every day you spend proving yourself to someone who can't see you is another day you're robbing yourself of the love you deserve. Because here's the truth that will set you free. Your value doesn't increase based on someone's ability to recognize it. It's constant, it's inherent. It's the birthright you were born with that no one, no man, no relationship can take away unless you let them. And the day you stop letting them is the day you start living. The awakening isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before. Someone made you doubt yourself and choosing her every single day until she becomes unbreakable. The decision to leave didn't come with trumpets or dramatic music swelling in the background like some movie montage. It came quietly on a Tuesday afternoon when I was folding laundry and found one of his t-shirts mixed in with mine. I'd washed it, dried it, folded it perfectly the way he liked, even though he'd left it at my place 3 weeks ago and hadn't mentioned picking it up. I stood there holding this soft cotton reminder of all the ways I'd been taking care of him while he barely took care of us. And I felt this calm settle over me like a blanket. Not anger, not devastation, just clarity. Crystal clear, life-altering clarity. I set the shirt down, walked to my closet, and pulled out the suitcase I'd been avoiding. Not the big one for dramatic exits, but the small carry-on that said, this isn't a performance, this is a practical next step. I started packing, not with tears or rage, but with purpose. Each item I placed in that suitcase was a choice. My favorite jeans that made me feel confident, the journal where I'd been writing my truth, the photo of my grandma who always told me never to settle. I wasn't running away, I was running toward the version of me who'd been waiting patiently while I tried to make someone else love her properly. I left his t-shirt on the bed with a note, not a long dramatic letter, just simple truth. I deserve someone who doesn't make me question my place in their life. Take care of yourself. No blame, no begging, no space for negotiation, because this wasn't about teaching him a lesson, though he'd learn one eventually. This was about teaching myself that my peace was non-negotiable. That night, I booked a hotel room downtown, nothing fancy, just clean sheets and a view of the city lights that didn't come with memories of broken promises. I ordered room service, the steak I'd been craving that he always said was too expensive for a regular night, and I ate it slowly while watching the skyline. My phone buzzed with his name, first confusion, then concern, then the beginning of panic as he realized I wasn't responding like usual, but I let it ring. Not to punish him, but to protect the fragile new boundary I was building, the one that said my emotional availability wasn't something to be taken for granted. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away months of compromise, of making myself smaller, of accepting less than I deserved. When I stepped out, I wrapped myself in the fluffy hotel robe and stood at the window watching people live their lives below. Couples walking hand in hand, friends laughing over drinks, solo travelers with their suitcases and stories, and I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of staying in something that was slowly killing the parts of me that made me extraordinary. The next morning, I woke up without the usual anxiety knot in my stomach. No checking my phone for his morning text that might not come. No planning my day around his schedule. Just me, my coffee, and the entire day stretching out like a blank canvas. I called my best friend, the one I'd been neglecting because couple time always came first, and we made plans for brunch. Real plans with a reservation and everything. I wore the dress I'd bought for a date that never happened, the red one with the slit that made me feel like fire. When I walked into the restaurant, heads turned, not because I was trying to be noticed, but because I finally wasn't trying to disappear. Brunch turned into shopping, turned into wine tasting, turned into one of those perfect days that happen when you're finally living for yourself. But let me be honest, the leaving wasn't all empowerment montages. There were moments when the weight of it hit me. Like when I walked past our favorite coffee shop and remembered the first time he held my hand across the table. Or when I opened my closet and saw the empty space where his clothes used to hang. Those moments brought tears, not because I wanted him back, but because I was grieving the version of us I'd believed in so fiercely, the one I'd poured my heart into creating. But here's what I learned about grief in those moments. It's not just about losing the person, it's about losing the future you built in your head. And once I let myself feel that fully, once I stopped trying to rush through the sadness to get to the I'm fine part, something beautiful happened. The grief started making room for gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, for the strength I was building, for the clarity that comes from finally seeing someone for who they are instead of who you needed them to be. By the end of that first week, I'd moved into a new apartment, nothing permanent, just a month to month while I figured out my next chapter. I chose the one with the big windows and the balcony, perfect for morning coffee. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. Bold colors, plants everywhere, art that spoke to my soul. No compromising on the masculine aesthetic he'd preferred. My friends came over for a housewarming, bringing wine and laughter and stories I hadn't heard in months because I'd been so wrapped up in him. We danced in the living room to songs that used to make me think of him, but now just made me think of freedom. The real test came about 2 weeks after I'd left. He showed up at my new place, flowers in hand, looking like a man who'd finally woken up to what he'd lost. He had this whole speech prepared about how he'd taken me for granted, how he saw now what an amazing woman I was, how he was ready to do better. And for one heartbeat, one tiny moment, I felt that old pull, the one that said, maybe if I just explained one more time, maybe if I gave him one more chance to see. But then I looked at him standing there with his rehearsed apologies and his last-minute effort, and I saw it clearly, this wasn't about me anymore. This was about him realizing the convenience he'd lost. The emotional support system that no longer orbited his needs. The woman who used to make his life easier, walking away and thriving without him. I thanked him for the flowers, told him I appreciated him finally seeing what I'd been showing him all along, but that the time for us had passed. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the calm certainty of someone who knows her worth isn't up for renegotiation. As I closed the door, I didn't feel triumph or vindication. I felt peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you chose yourself when it would have been easier to choose the familiar discomfort. The kind of peace that comes from understanding that leaving isn't giving up, it's graduating. Graduating to a life where your value is the starting point, not the finish line someone might eventually reach. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights that used to feel lonely now, feeling full of possibility. I thought about all the women still in the place I'd been, still waiting for someone to choose them fully, still teaching men that their love could be treated casually. And I made a promise to myself to keep sharing this truth. That leaving isn't about the dramatic exit. It's about the quiet entrance into your own life. It's about choosing the discomfort of the unknown over the comfort of being undervalued. It's about understanding that every day you stay somewhere you have to fight for basic respect is another day you're delaying the love you deserve, because the right person won't need to lose you to value you. They'll see your worth from the moment they meet you and treat it like the precious gift it is. And anyone who needs to learn that lesson the hard way, let them. Their education is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to the woman who trusted her heart to someone who handled it carelessly, to make sure she never has to do that again. The decision to leave is not the end of your love story. It's the beginning of the chapter where you become the main character who finally gets the ending she deserves. The first few days without him felt like learning to breathe with one lung. Everything was harder, slower, laced with this constant awareness of absence. I'd reach for my phone to share something funny and remember there was no one waiting for my texts anymore. I'd cook dinner for one and catch myself setting out 2 plates out of habit. The apartment, my beautiful new sanctuary, felt both too quiet and too loud, with all the space his presence used to fill. But mixed in with that hollow feeling was something else, something I'd forgotten existed: room to move, room to think, room to just be without performing availability or managing someone else's emotions. The first morning I woke up at 6 a.m., out of habit, his habit, the one where I'd check if he needed anything before starting my day, but he wasn't there. No requests for coffee, no passive-aggressive comments about the temperature, no subtle expectations about how my morning should revolve around his. Just me, the soft light filtering through my curtains, and the realization that I could go back to sleep if I wanted. So I did. I slept until 9:30, something I hadn't done in years, and when I woke up, the world hadn't ended. My emails were still there, my responsibilities hadn't vanished, but I felt rested in a way that went beyond physical. Like my soul had finally exhaled after holding its breath for months. I made breakfast slowly, eggs exactly how I liked them, runny yolk, extra pepper, no compromising because he thought pepper was too spicy in the morning. I ate at my little table by the window, watching people rush to work, and I felt this strange gratitude for my unhurried pace. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of possibility. That afternoon, I went for a walk without a destination, something I'd stopped doing because walks were for couples or for rushing between obligations. I put on my favorite playlist, the one with all the songs that made me feel alive, and I walked until my legs ached and my thoughts quieted. I stopped at a bookstore, browsed for hours, bought 3 books that had nothing to do with self-help or relationships, just stories that sounded interesting. When I got home, I made tea and read on my balcony until the sun set, losing myself in someone else's world instead of obsessing over the one I'd left. But the nights were harder. Nights had always been our time, even when they weren't. The late night texts, the 2 a.m. phone calls, the way I'd stay up waiting for connection that might come in fits and starts. Now the nights stretched out endless and quiet. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of alone. Not lonely, there's a difference, alone. The kind of alone that makes you confront every choice you've made, every pattern you've repeated. I'd think about the good times, the way he'd look at me sometimes like I was magic, and I'd wonder if I'd made a mistake, if maybe I was too harsh, too quick to leave, if real love meant staying through the hard parts. But then I'd remember the other times, the cancellations, the silences, the way I'd trained myself to expect disappointment and call it patience. And I'd roll over, hug my pillow, and whisper to myself, you did the right thing. Because the hard parts shouldn't include constantly questioning your worth. The first weekend was the real test. Weekends had always been his domain, planned around his mood, his friends, his spontaneous decisions. Now Saturday morning stretched out blank and beautiful. I could do anything or nothing. The freedom was terrifying. I started with coffee at that little shop I'd always wanted to try but never had because it was too far from his place. The barista remembered my order by the 3rd visit, something that made me feel seen in this small, perfect way. Then I went to the farmer's market, bought flowers for myself, the kind of extravagant bouquet I'd only ever received when I was in trouble or when he wanted something. I arranged them in a vase on my table and they made the whole apartment smell like possibility. That night, I had friends over, not the couple friends we'd accumulated, but my friends. And the ones who'd been waiting for me to come back to them. We ordered pizza, drank too much wine, laughed until our stomachs hurt about things that had nothing to do with men or relationships. We danced in my living room to songs from college, songs that reminded me of who I was before I started defining myself by someone else's attention. When they left, I didn't feel the usual Sunday dread of preparing for another week of performing perfection. I felt full. Not the temporary fullness of attention, but the deep, sustainable fullness of genuine connection. The emptiness started filling in unexpected ways. I signed up for a pottery class on Tuesday nights, something I'd always wanted to try, but never had time for between keeping his life running smoothly. My first bowl was lopsided and perfect. The instructor said imperfections were where the character lived, and I thought about how that applied to people too. I started running in the mornings, not to lose weight for anyone else's gaze, but because the rhythm of my feet on pavement matched the rhythm of my healing heart. Each mile was a conversation with myself. You're stronger than you think. You're worthy exactly as you are. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. The alone time became sacred. I'd take long baths with music playing, no rushing to be available for texts. I'd cook elaborate meals just because I wanted to taste something new. I'd sit on my balcony at night with a book and a blanket, watching the stars that had been there all along, but I'd been too busy managing someone else's universe to notice. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice, the absence stopped feeling like loss and started feeling like space. Space for new growth. Space for the parts of me that had been neglected. Space for the kind of love that wouldn't require me to shrink to fit into someone else's life. About a month in, I had my first real laugh, the kind that starts in your belly and takes over your whole body. I was at the grocery store, reaching for the exact brand of cereal he'd hated, but I'd secretly loved, and I dropped the box. As I bent to pick it up, I caught my reflection in the freezer door, hair in a messy bun, wearing workout clothes with a coffee stain, no makeup, and I looked happy, really happy. Not performing happiness, not waiting for someone to validate it, just existing in this pure state of contentment with myself. I laughed out loud right there in aisle 7, and the sound of it surprised me. It had been so long since I'd heard my real laugh, the one that wasn't measured or moderated for someone else's comfort. That was the moment I knew the emptiness wasn't permanent, it was transitional. Like the space between songs on your favorite album, necessary for the next note to hit just right, the freedom I'd been afraid of became the air I breathed. I started saying yes to things that scared me. Solo travel to that city I'd always wanted to visit, the writing workshop where I'd share my words with strangers, the dance class where I'd move my body just for the joy of it. Each yes was a brick in the foundation of my new life, built entirely on my terms. And the most beautiful part, the more space I gave myself, the more the right things started filling it. Not replacements, not rebounds, but genuine connections with people who saw me fully and showed up consistently. The alone wasn't lonely anymore, it was luxurious. It was necessary. It was the cocoon where I transformed from the woman who'd accepted crumbs into the woman who feasted on her own abundance. The days without him became the foundation of everything beautiful that came next. Because freedom isn't just the absence of chains, it's the presence of possibility. And once you've tasted it, you understand that any love worth having will only add to your freedom, never take it away. And then the messages started trickling in. First, one tentative text a week after I'd settled into my new rhythm. Hey, you okay? Haven't heard from you. As if the silence was a mystery to him. As if he hadn't been the architect of it for months. I let it sit for a day, not out of cruelty, but because I was busy living the life I'd paused for him. When I finally responded, it was simple. I'm great, actually. Taking some space, no invitation for explanation, no opening for negotiation, but he wasn't done. The next one came 2 days later, longer this time, full of the realizations I'd been begging him to have while we were together. I've been thinking about us a lot. I see now how much you did for me, how I took it for granted. Can we talk? Classic timing, right? The moment you're no longer orbiting his world, suddenly you're the sun he can't live without. I remember reading that message while sitting in my pottery class, clay up to my elbows, creating something beautiful with my own hands, and I felt this mix of compassion and clarity. Compassion for the man who was finally feeling the weight of his choices. Clarity that his awakening had nothing to do with my worth and everything to do with his loss. The call started after that, first leaving voicemails that sounded confused. Babe, did I do something wrong? Call me back. Then progressively more desperate as the days without my response stretched on. I miss you, I miss us. I didn't realize how much you meant to me until you were gone. And there it was. The truth I'd known all along, but he'd been too comfortable to acknowledge. Some men don't value what they have until it's walking out the door with its dignity intact. I listened to one voicemail while making dinner, my new favorite recipe with all the spices he'd hated, and I didn't feel triumph or vindication. I felt sad for him, genuinely sad, because I knew what was coming next, the bargaining phase, the promises, the version of him I dreamed of finally showing up, but too late to matter. He started showing up places he knew I'd be, not in a creepy way, but in that calculated, casual way men do when they're trying to force proximity. The coffee shop where I'd become a regular. Suddenly, there he was, in line behind me, acting surprised. Wow, what a coincidence! But his eyes gave him away, nervous, hopeful, like a kid who'd broken his favorite toy and was hoping super glue and apologies could fix it. He bought my coffee, tried to make small talk about the weather, about work, anything to keep me standing there. And I let him, not because I was weakening, but because I wanted to see it clearly, this man finally fighting for something he treated so casually. We should grab dinner, he said, talk properly. I have so much to say. I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from knowing your peace is worth more than his panic. And I told him, I appreciate that, but I'm good, really good. The look on his face, that mix of shock and realization that his usual charm wasn't working, that the woman standing in front of him wasn't the same one who'd rearranged her life for his, maybe that was the moment he started to understand. Not just intellectually, but in his bones. The gifts came next, flowers delivered to my new apartment with notes that got progressively more heartfelt. Thinking of you every day, you were the best part of my life. I see now what an idiot I was. Beautiful words, the kind I'd craved when they would have meant something. But now, they felt like echoes in an empty room. I kept the flowers because they were pretty and I deserved pretty things, but I deleted the notes. Not out of anger, but because I was done collecting evidence of someone's potential. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Potential means nothing without consistent action, and his action was coming 6 months too late. The real breakdown came about a month after I'd left. He called at 2 a.m., the time when defenses are lowest and truths come out. I answered not because I was hoping, but because I was curious about what version of him would show up in the dark. His voice was thick with emotion, not the performative kind, but real. I can't sleep, he said. I keep replaying everything. The way I treated you, the way I made you feel like you had to fight for my time. I see it now, all of it. You were always there, always giving, and I just took. I'm so sorry. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. Not because the words were perfect, but because I could hear the hollowness in his voice, the absence of the safety net he'd relied on. The woman who used to soothe his insecurities, celebrate his wins, make his life easier, she was gone. And in her place was silence that echoed louder than any argument ever could. I let him talk, let him pour out months of realizations in one breathless confession. About how his friends had started asking where I was, how his mom kept bringing me up, how his apartment felt too big without my laughter filling it. About how he tried dating, tried filling the space I'd left with someone new. But it wasn't the same. They don't get my jokes, he said. They don't look at me like I'm their whole world. They don't love me like you did. And there it was, the truth that broke my heart, not for me, but for him. Because what he was missing wasn't just me, it was the version of himself that existed when someone loved him unconditionally. The version that felt secure, that felt worthy, that felt like a better man because someone saw that potential and nurtured it. But here's what he didn't understand yet, and what I need you to understand if you're watching someone wake up too late. That version of him wasn't real. It was a projection. It was what happens when one person does all the emotional heavy lifting while the other coasts. And when that person leaves, the coasting stops, and suddenly they're left carrying their own weight for the first time. He thought he was missing me, but he was missing the ease of having someone manage his emotional world. The real turning point came when he asked the question I'd been waiting for, is there any chance? Any way we could try again? I've changed. I swear I have. And I could hear the desperation, the genuine belief that if he just promised hard enough, I'd come running back to make his life comfortable again. But I wasn't that woman anymore. The one who'd accepted promises as currency. The one who'd believed that love meant enduring inconsistency until someone finally decided to show up fully. I believe you've changed, I told him gently, or at least I believe you're starting to, and I'm proud of you for that. But this isn't about you anymore. It's about me and what I know I deserve. I deserve someone who saw my worth from day one, not someone who needed to lose me to find it. The silence on the other end was profound, the kind that happens when someone finally hears truth they can't argue with. When he spoke again, his voice was small. I get it. I do. I just I wish I'd gotten it sooner. We both do, I said, and I meant it. Not just for him, but for the version of me who'd wasted time teaching someone how to love her properly. The conversation ended there. No dramatic declarations, no final door slam. Just two people acknowledging that some lessons come at the cost of something irreplaceable. In the weeks that followed, the contact tapered off. The flowers stopped. The late night calls became texts, checking in as friends. But I could feel the shift in him, the way his messages carried weight now, the way he was careful with his words, like someone handling something fragile for the first time. He'd started therapy, he told me once, was reading books about emotional availability, was trying to become the man I'd needed him to be, and I hoped, genuinely hoped, that he would. Not for me, I'd close that chapter, but for whoever came next. Because the world needs more men who understand that love isn't something you fall into and then coast through. It's something you choose actively every single day. Watching him realize what he'd lost wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about confirmation. Confirmation that I'd been right to leave, that my worth wasn't something to be discovered after someone lost the privilege of my presence. That the love I'd given so freely had been precious, and his inability to see that in real time was his loss, not my failure. The most profound moment came months later, when I ran into him at a mutual friend's wedding. He looked different, healthier, more present. When our eyes met across the room, there was no awkwardness, just a quiet acknowledgement. He approached later, during the reception, and we talked like old friends who'd shared a significant chapter but were now in different books. "You look amazing," he said, and for the first time I believed he meant it without wanting anything in return. "You do too," I replied, because he did. The growth was visible. "I'm happy for you," he said, and his eyes held mine steady. "Truly, you deserve everything." And in that moment, I saw the full arc of his realization, not just regret, but respect. The kind that comes from understanding that some women aren't lessons, they're blessings you either recognize in real time or spend the rest of your life wishing you treated differently. As he walked away, I felt the final piece of closure settle into place, not because he'd validated my choice to leave, but because I'd validated it for myself every day since. His realization wasn't my victory, it was his education. And the cost of that education had been the privilege of loving a woman who knew her worth long before he did. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can teach someone isn't how to love you better. It's what it feels like to lose someone who loved you well. Because that lesson, when learned honestly, changes everything that comes after. The growth didn't happen in grand gestures or overnight transformations. It happened in the quiet moments, the ones no one sees, but you feel in your bones. Like the first time I chose to stay home on a Friday night, not because I was sad, but because I genuinely wanted to be with myself. I made popcorn the way my grandma taught me, with real butter and a dash of garlic salt, put on my comfiest sweats, and watched 3 movies in a row without once checking my phone for validation. That night, curled up on my couch with my dog who'd become my new adventure buddy, I realized I wasn't healing from him, I was healing into myself. The version of me who'd always been there, waiting patiently while I tried to make someone else see her magic. I started writing again, not the careful, performative posts I'd curated for his approval, but raw, honest words about what it felt like to rebuild after giving too much to the wrong person. My journal filled with pages about the difference between loneliness and solitude, about how grief and gratitude can live in the same heart, about the specific ache of missing someone's potential more than their reality. Those words became my therapy, my North Star, my way of making sense of the wreckage and finding the treasure beneath. One entry, written 3 months after leaving, became the foundation of everything. I am not broken for loving deeply. I am not foolish for believing in someone's capacity to change. I am not weak for walking away when that capacity remained unused. I am becoming the woman who loves herself with the same intensity she once reserved for those who couldn't handle it. I read that back to myself every morning for a month until it wasn't just words, but truth carved into my spirit. The physical transformation followed the emotional one. I cut my hair not in a dramatic post-breakup chop, but in a deliberate choice of a style that made me feel powerful every time I caught my reflection. Shoulder length, angled, the kind of cut that says I know who I am without needing to announce it. I started dressing for the life I was building. Bold patterns, statement jewelry, clothes that made me feel like art in motion. My friends noticed, first, there's something different about you, they'd say, and I'd smile because I knew exactly what it was. I was finally dressing for the woman I was becoming, not the one I thought someone else needed me to be. The real growth showed up in my boundaries, though. The way I started saying no without explanation or apology. No to plans that drained me. No to conversations that required me to shrink. No to relationships, romantic or otherwise, that required me to perform worthiness. I lost some people along the way, the ones who'd been comfortable with the version of me that overgave and underexpected. But the ones who stayed, they became my chosen family. The ones who celebrated my growth instead of being threatened by it. I started therapy not because I was broken, but because I was invested in becoming unbreakable. My therapist, this incredible woman with kind eyes and zero tolerance for bullshit, helped me unpack the patterns I'd inherited, the ones that taught me love meant earning, that worth was conditional, that my needs were negotiable. We worked through the specific ways I'd abandoned myself in that relationship, the micro moments of self-betrayal that had added up to macro devastation. You weren't just loving him, she said one session. You were trying to prove something to the little girl inside who learned early that love required perfection. That truth hit like a freight train, but the good kind, the kind that clears the tracks for something better to come through. The professional growth was unexpected but profound. Without the constant emotional management of a one-sided relationship, I had bandwidth I'd forgotten existed. I took on projects I'd been hesitant about, spoke up in meetings with confidence that surprised even me, negotiated the raise I'd been afraid to ask for because what if it made things tense at home? My boss pulled me aside after a presentation that killed it. Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it. This is the leader we've been waiting for. And I almost laughed because if only she knew the whatever was finally choosing myself over someone else's comfort. I started mentoring younger women at work, the ones with that familiar look of overgiving and underexpecting. I take them for coffee and share the truths I'd learned the hard way, that your value in the workplace isn't proven by how many hours you work or how many needs you anticipate, but by the quality of your contribution and the boundaries you maintain. One of them, Sarah, became my work daughter of sorts. She'd come to my office with that same anxious energy I'd once carried, apologizing for taking up space, and I'd gently redirect her. Never apologize for having needs. The right people will make room for them. Watching her blossom under that guidance became one of my greatest joys, proof that the pain I'd processed was becoming someone else's prevention. The spiritual growth was quieter but deeper. I started meditating every morning, 10 minutes that stretched to 20, then 30. Not the perfect, cross-legged, empty mind kind, but the real kind where thoughts about him still floated through, but I learned to observe them without attachment. There goes another memory I'd think, thank you for the lesson, goodbye. I reconnected with my faith, not in the structured way I'd abandoned when couple activities took priority, but in the personal, intimate way of long walks where I'd talk to God like an old friend. About the specific ways I'd lost myself, about the grace of second chances, about the miracle of becoming whole again. Those walks became my church, the trees my congregation, the wind carrying my prayers and bringing back peace. The most surprising growth came in my capacity to receive. I'd spent so long being the giver, the planner, the emotional caretaker, that receiving felt foreign, but I practiced. When friends offered help moving into my new place, I let them instead of insisting I could do it alone. When colleagues complimented my work, I said thank you without deflection. When the universe sent small blessings, a perfect parking spot, a stranger's smile, a song that came on exactly when I needed it, I received them as the love notes they were instead of brushing them off as coincidence. I even started dating myself properly. Fancy dinners where I'd dress up just for me, order the wine I wanted, linger over dessert without rushing, museum visits where I'd stand in front of paintings until they moved me to tears. Concerts where I'd dance like no one was watching because, for the first time, the only person whose opinion mattered was mine. Each date with myself was a love letter to the woman I'd become, proof that I could be both the giver and receiver of my own affection. About 6 months in, I hit what I call my golden hour moment. I was at the beach watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that felt specifically created for my healing. And I had this full body realization. I wasn't just surviving without him, I was thriving in ways I never had with him. My laughter came easier. My sleep was deeper. My dreams were bigger. My heart, which I thought might stay tender forever, had become this resilient, expansive thing capable of holding both the pain of what was and the joy of what is. I stood there with my feet in the sand, wind whipping my shorter hair, wearing the bikini I'd bought because it made me feel powerful, not because anyone else would see, and I cried. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when you realize you've made it through the fire and come out not just unscathed, but refined. The growth wasn't linear. There were still days when old patterns tried to resurface, when I'd catch myself drafting texts I never sent, when I'd see couples and feel that familiar ache. But those days became fewer, the ache less sharp, the recovery faster. I'd learned the tools, the journal, the meditation, the friends who spoke truth, the therapist who held space, the self-dates that reminded me of my own company. The pain that had once felt like a life sentence became a teacher whose curriculum I'd mastered. I started sharing my story more publicly, first with close friends, then in wider circles, then through writing that found its way to women who needed it. The messages started coming. Your words gave me the courage to leave. I thought I was alone in feeling this way. Thank you for showing me what's possible on the other side. Each message was a reminder that my pain had purpose, that my growth was creating ripples beyond what I could see. The most profound growth, though, was in my understanding of love itself. I'd thought love meant endurance, that the measure of its strength was how much discomfort you could bear. But I'd learned that real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that elevates, is about enhancement, not endurance. It's about two people choosing to make each other's lives richer, not requiring sacrifice of self to prove devotion. I'd grown from a woman who accepted crumbs into one who feasted on her own abundance, from someone who taught men how to undervalue her, into someone who only entertained those who recognized her worth immediately. The pain that had once threatened to define me had become the soil where my strongest roots grew, and from those roots sprang a woman who would never again settle for being anyone's option. True growth isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming the fullest version of who you were always meant to be. And once you've tasted that fullness, you understand that any love worth having will only add to your abundance, never require you to diminish it. The universe has this beautiful way of working when you finally stop looking, when you stop trying to fill the space, someone left with someone new. When you stop treating dating like a job interview for the position of person who will finally make me feel worthy. That's exactly when love, real love, the kind that doesn't require you to shrink or prove or wait, finds you. For me, it started with coffee. Not the dramatic movie kind where eyes meet across a crowded cafe, but the quiet kind, where you're so absorbed in your book that you don't notice someone watching you with genuine curiosity until they ask what you're reading. His name was David, though names aren't important here. What matters is how he looked at me like I was a complete sentence, not a rough draft needing revision. We talked for 2 hours that first day about books and travel and the specific way light hits the river at sunset. No games, no calculated charm, just two people genuinely interested in what the other had to say. When he asked for my number, it wasn't with that familiar edge of, let's see if this goes anywhere, but with the quiet confidence of someone who already knew he wanted to know more. Our first date was breakfast, because he'd remembered I said mornings were my favorite time of day. He picked me up with coffee, exactly how I liked it, extra foam, dash of cinnamon, and we went to this little diner with the best pancakes in the city. We talked until they kicked us out for the lunch rush, then walked along the river for hours. He listened, really listened, the way people do when they're not performing interest, but genuinely absorbed. When I shared about my journey, about the relationship that had taught me my worth the hard way, he didn't flinch or try to fix it. He just said, that man missed out on something extraordinary, and I'm grateful every day that he did. The way he treated me from day one wasn't exceptional because it was grand gestures, though there were plenty of those. It was exceptional because it was consistent. He texted when he said he would. He showed up 5 minutes early, not 20 minutes late, with excuses. He remembered that I loved extra cheese and hated olives, that my grandma's birthday was sacred, that I cried at commercials with dogs. He celebrated my wins like they were his own, showed up to my work events with pride, sent me articles he thought I'd find interesting, with notes about why they reminded him of me. But more than the actions, it was the energy, the way he never made me question where I stood. The way being with him felt like adding chapters to an already complete book, not trying to rewrite myself to fit into his story. He saw my independence not as a threat, but as a gift. My boundaries not as walls, but as the blueprint for how to love me properly. When we had our first disagreement about something stupid, like whose turn it was to choose the restaurant, he didn't disappear or get defensive. He said, I hear you and I want to understand better. And we talked it through like adults who respected each other's perspectives. That moment, more than any grand gesture, showed me what I'd been missing. Love that includes conflict resolution, not love that requires avoiding conflict at all costs. The physical intimacy grew naturally, not rushed to fill emotional voids, not withheld as punishment, but present when it felt right for both of us. The first time we made love, it wasn't about proving anything or filling silence. It was about connection, about two people choosing to share something sacred because they wanted to, not because they needed to. He held me afterward like I was both fragile and unbreakable, whispering not generic sweet nothings, but specific truths. The way you see the world changes how I see it. Your laugh is my favorite sound. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. The safety of that, after years of walking on eggshells, felt like coming home to a place I'd never known existed. He met my friends early, not because I needed approval, but because they were important to me and he understood that my world was richer with them in it. They grilled him, of course. My girls are protective after watching me rebuild, but he handled it with grace and humor. When my best friend pulled me aside later and said, he looks at you like you're the answer to every question he's ever had, I knew she was right. Because that's exactly how it felt. Not like I was being chosen despite my complexity, but because of it. The integration was seamless. He fit into my life not by displacing anything, but by enhancing everything. My morning routine stayed sacred, but now included his texts that made me smile before my feet hit the floor. My girls' nights remained non-negotiable, but now included stories about this man who understood their importance. My ambition, which had once been a source of tension in past relationships, became something he championed. When I got the promotion that required more travel, his response wasn't, how will this affect us, but how can I support you through this transition? He came with me on my first work trip, not to monitor or possess, but to explore a new city together between my meetings. We found hole-in-the-wall restaurants, took ridiculous selfies at tourist traps, made love in hotel rooms with views that took our breath away. The relationship deepened through ordinary moments as much as extraordinary ones. The way he'd bring me coffee when I was deep in work without being asked. The way we'd grocery shop together, arguing good-naturedly about cereal choices. The way he'd fall asleep with his hand on my hip like it was the most natural thing in the world. These weren't grand gestures. They were consistent choices to show up fully every single day. When I introduced him to my family, my dad pulled me aside after something he'd never done with previous partners. That man looks at you like your mother looked at me for 50 years. He said, voice thick, don't let that go. And I knew without doubt that this was what I'd been healing toward. Not just love, but love that felt like freedom. Love that celebrated my fullness instead of requiring my smallness. The first time he said, I love you, it was 3 months in, after I'd had a particularly brutal day at work. I came home exhausted, defeated, makeup cried off, hair in a messy bun, wearing the sweatpants with the hole in the knee. He took one look at me, pulled me into his arms and said, I love you, exactly like this. I love your strength and your softness, your ambition and your vulnerability, your everything. No perfect moment, no orchestrated romance, just truth in the middle of my mess. And I believed him, not because I needed to, but because his actions had proven it every day since we'd met. Our love grew roots in the soil of my healing, watered by mutual respect, fertilized by honest communication. We built traditions, our Sunday morning farmers market routine, our monthly no phones dates where we'd leave technology at home and just be present with each other, our annual trip to the beach where I'd first had my golden hour realization. He became part of my story not by rewriting it, but by adding chapters that made the whole book richer. The most beautiful part was watching how my past relationship, the one that had broken me open, actually prepared me for this. Every boundary I'd learned to set, every red flag I'd learned to recognize, every truth I'd learned about my worth became the foundation for this new love. David never had to learn my value the hard way because I'd already done the work of knowing it myself. He got the benefit of the woman I'd become through fire, the one who would never again accept less than she deserved because she'd lived the cost of settling. When people ask how I knew he was different, I tell them about the ordinary moments. The way he celebrates my wins without making them about him. The way he handles my bad days with patience instead of pressure. The way he chooses me every single day, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. But mostly, I tell them about the peace, the profound cellular peace of being with someone who never makes you question your place in their life. The peace of knowing that love, real love, doesn't require you to earn it daily, but inspires you to grow within it. A year in, we moved in together, not out of necessity or fear of losing each other, but because we wanted to build a home that reflected both of us. We chose the apartment with the big kitchen for my cooking experiments and the extra room for his music equipment. We painted the walls, colors we both loved, hung art that spoke to our shared aesthetic, created spaces that honored both our need for togetherness and our need for individuality. The first night in our new place, we cooked dinner together, dancing around each other in the kitchen to our favorite playlist, and I had this moment of pure gratitude. Not just for him, but for the journey that led me here. And as I stand here in our kitchen on a random Tuesday morning, watching him flip pancakes while humming off-key to the radio, wearing nothing but basketball shorts, and that smile that still makes my heart skip after 2 years, I realize this is what self-worth looks like in real life. Not the dramatic declarations or the perfect Instagram moments, but the quiet certainty that comes from knowing you are the foundation of your own happiness, and anyone lucky enough to join you is there because they enhance what was already whole. I think back to that woman in the bathroom mirror, the one with tired eyes and a heart full of doubt, and I want to reach through time to tell her, hold on, sister, because the best is yet to come. But only if you stop waiting for someone else to bring it. Because here's the final truth I've learned, the one that ties every lesson together. Your self-worth isn't a destination you arrive at after enough therapy or enough dates with yourself or enough promotions at work. It's the compass you carry from the moment you decide that being treated like an option is no longer an option for you. It's the quiet voice that says no when your body knows the truth before your mind catches up. It's the boundary that protects your peace like a moat around a castle you finally recognize as your birthright. David and I built this life together, yes, but I built the foundation alone in those months of solitude and growth. Every boundary I set with him echoes the ones I set with myself first. Every time he chooses me fully, it reinforces the choice I made to never choose less again. Our love works because it's built on two complete people who understand that partnership isn't about filling each other's empty spaces, but about creating new spaces together. We argue sometimes. Of course we do. We're human. But our arguments end with understanding, not resentment. They end with, how can we do better, instead of, why can't you be different? They end with make-up sex that feels like reconnection, not manipulation. And in those moments, I see the full circle of my journey. From the woman who accepted silence as communication to the one who demands words that match actions, from the one who celebrated someone else's wins while minimizing her own to the one whose partner shows up with champagne for her victories before she even thinks to ask. But let me be clear, this isn't a fairy tale where the right man fixes everything. David didn't save me. He met me at the top of the mountain I'd climbed myself. He didn't teach me my worth. He recognized it immediately because I'd done the work of knowing it intimately. Our relationship thrives because I brought a full cup to the table, and so did he, and together we keep them overflowing without ever draining each other. The real magic happens in the everyday choices. The way I still take solo trips because my independence is sacred, and he packs my favorite snacks without being asked. The way he pursues his music with the same passion I pursue my career, and we celebrate each other's hustle without competition. The way we have State of the Union check-ins every Sunday over coffee, where we talk about what's working and what needs tweaking, because we've learned that relationships require maintenance like any living thing. I've watched women in my life go through their own versions of this journey, some leaving toxic situations, some choosing to stay and demand better, some realizing they were the ones treating themselves like options. And the common thread, the moment they decided their worth wasn't negotiable. The moment they stopped accepting busy as an excuse for absence, going through something as permission for disrespect, I'll try as commitment. The moment they understood that love should feel like freedom, not a prison sentence of constant proving. I think about my ex sometimes, not with bitterness or longing, but with genuine hope that he's become the man he promised to be in those desperate late night calls. I've heard through mutual friends that he's in a healthy relationship now, that he shows up consistently, that he learned the cost of taking love for granted and decided never to pay it again. And that brings me peace, not because I need his growth for my validation, but because it proves the universal truth. People can change, but they rarely do it for someone who's still there accepting less. They do it when the absence of what they lost becomes louder than the comfort of what they had. My message to every woman reading this, whether you're in the thick of being someone's backup plan, or freshly out of it licking your wounds, or thriving in the love you finally feel you deserve, is this: your worth is the one thing no one can take from you unless you hand it over. It's not proven by how much you give, how long you stay, how understanding you are, or how perfectly you love someone who can't love you back the same. It's proven by the life you build when you stop letting other people determine your value. It's proven every time you choose yourself when it would be easier to choose the familiar pain. It's proven in the quiet moments when you look in the mirror and don't need anyone else's voice to tell you you're enough. Because sister, you are. You've always been. From the day you took your first breath to the day you'll take your last, your worth has been constant, like gravity, like sunlight, like the beat of your own heart. Anyone who treats you as less than that isn't confused or busy or going through something. They're choosing not to see. And you get to choose not to stay. You get to walk away with your head high and your heart open, not to the same kind of love that diminished you, but to the kind that celebrates every inch of who you are. You get to build a life so full of your own light that when the right person comes along, they don't complete you, they illuminate you further. I've lived every stage of this journey, from the desperate hoping, to the painful leaving, to the sacred solitude, to the joyful becoming, to the partnership that feels like breathing. And if I could bottle one truth to give you, it would be this: the love you deserve isn't waiting for you to become perfect or patient or understanding enough. It's waiting for you to become unwilling to accept anything less than what you know you're worth. Because when you carry that truth in your bones, when you live it in your choices, when you demand it in your relationships, the universe conspires to bring you exactly what you've been preparing for all along. Not a rescue, not a fix, but a mirror. Someone who reflects back the worth you finally claim for yourself. Someone who sees you fully and says, yes, this, all of this, every complicated, beautiful, powerful inch. And until then, until that person shows up with their actions matching their words and their consistency matching their promises, you keep building, you keep growing, you keep choosing yourself with the same fervor you once reserved for someone who couldn't handle it. Because the greatest love story you'll ever live isn't about finding someone who treats you like a priority. It's about becoming the woman who knows she is one and never letting anyone convince her otherwise again. Your self-worth isn't just non-negotiable. It's the crown you were born to wear. And the moment you stop letting anyone knock it off your head is the moment your real life begins. If this message moved you, if it spoke to the part of you that's been waiting to be seen and celebrated, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment with your own story of choosing yourself, like this video to spread the truth, and share it with every woman who needs to hear that her worth isn't up for debate, so you never miss the latest updates on living your most empowered life.